Welcome back to another episode of TableSetters covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined by my tag team partner, Devin. What's up, man?
What's going on, dude? Glad to be on here with you talking baseball, some fantasy baseball talk tonight. But I got to ask you, on the heels of John Cena turning heel, what do you have to say as far as think baseball here? Biggest baseball heel turn that you can think of right off the top of your head?
Oh, it's hard to say. I think of the steroid scandals and just the night and day of the Barry Bonds of the world, the A-Rods of the world, but wasn't the intentional heel turn like we saw with John Cena. John Cena's heel turn was something else, dude, and I'm excited to see where it goes. For the first time in 22, 23 years, we get John Cena as a heel. And
Crazy.
the young fans don't know anything about that. We remember Dr. Thugonomics, John Cena, but it's a whole different animal, corporate Cena, Hollywood Cena, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah, and I bring it up right at the top of the show at the risk of some people not being wrestling fans here, but I think this one kind of my wife was talking to me about it before, saying I saw John Cena turn heel, and she definitely does not care about wrestling. So I think this goes past just the hardcore wrestling fan. I think everyone kind of got wind of it and knows about it at this point. So I don't know. Do you have any guesses where it's going next?
Well, it totally feels like we're going to get a nice John Cena heel run out of this at the very least. I think he'll turn babyface at the very end. And you guys can check out all my wrestling takes. I did a reaction show on, I think it was, Saturday night, right after Elimination Chamber for Wrestling Tonight at Turnbuckle Tavern. You guys can find that. And I talked about John Cena in full. And the one thing that I was having a conversation about was the Travis Scott involvement, where he was in the ring and we're all laughing about it. But 20 years from now, what the hell is Travis Scott doing in the ring? And that's the funny part about this, because if you go back to 1996 during Bash the Beach, where Hogan turned heel, I was trying to look at the relative timeline of music. That'd be like Bone Thugs and Harmony being in the ring with the NWO and everyone being able to take it in. So that was my comparison on the show.
Yeah, that I was texting with some people as it happened, and I'm like, this is really cool and really well done, but like, can we get Travis Scott like out of the background? I don't know. I mean, I guess they have something planned for him, but I don't know. Before we get too far into the weeds, if you're joining us here on, remind me, Steve, we episode 65 here? Is it 65 or 66? Where are we?
This is episode 66. You guys go back in the archives, check out episode 65, a great one with the head coach of the
Okay.
Fighting Camels from Campbell University, Chris Marks. Some good stuff over there.
All right, so 66 it is. And for episode 66, kind of a unique episode for us. We are going to kind of break down our own fantasy baseball league draft, our baseball league. Steve is the commish here, known as For the Fame. We've been at it how many years now, Steve? Are we at what, 13, 14,
Yeah,
12?
2012 was the first year, and there was 1 year we had taken off for some inexplicable reason, not sure why. And the in between, we had our own quasi lockout, and then we got back to the fold with the reinvented league. It's kind of a split of two different eras of the league from 2012, and I think 2015 was the year we didn't do it.
Okay. So what Steve and I are going to try to do here is make this interesting to the outside observer by kind of going through each round and discussing what kind of opened our eyes or grabbed our attention most from each round. So we'll go through the draft that way. And to the many people that would listen to the show that are not in the league, I would hope. For you guys, I think you'll be more interested in the player discussion and also the draft strategy parts. What I want to do here at the top of the show is just make sure everybody understands the structure of our league, so some of this discussion makes sense and you can relate to it a little bit. So our league is a keeper league, and we keep quite a few people, which changes draft strategy completely because some people are already plugged in. So to start with there, we like to call it, I mean, Steve uses the word dynasty adjacent all the time, which I think is perfect. Dynasty, you're keeping your whole roster year to year. We certainly don't do that. We've kind of expanded the amount of keepers that we're allowed to take with us from year to year over the course of time here with this league. But as it stands right now, we're allowed to keep one position player, one pitcher, and then one player with 5 or less years of service. So that could be pitcher or hitter. And then 2 players that are 2 years or under of service. Again, pitcher or hitter. And then after that, and this is really gets the dynasty feel going, we are allowed to keep 6 prospects, or what Yahoo, which we use Yahoo for our league, they label them as NAs, or not actives. So that gives you a little bit of a feel for the structure. And the reason that is important is because when we start going through these rounds and you hear some of the players that were taken in certain rounds, you got to understand that some of the very highly thought of or high average draft position players were already kept. And because some people keep these guys as NAs from years ago when they were just prospects, you can get them at a great value. So if you keep an NA player that just popped into the major leagues and maybe lost their rookie title because they got either over 150 at bats or under 50 innings, or sorry, over 50 innings pitched, um, they pop into our 24th round the first year we keep them. And then little by little they move up. I'll give you a perfect example. I've been able to hold on to Ellie De La Cruz and Gunnar Henderson for a few years now. I had them as prospect eligible players. So 1 year they were in my draft at round 23 and 24. Now, a few years later, I think Gunnar had to be kept in the 11th round and Ellie in the 13th, somewhere around there. So I'm still getting unbelievable value out of guys that would probably go somewhere in the first 2 rounds in a regular draft or redraft league. So that is the frame of reference I think everybody listening has to have to make sure it makes a little more sense. Steve, I have more to go through here, but before I get too far, anything you want to add to that part of the structure?
Well, yeah, the tiered thing is something that's important for people to understand. As Devin mentioned, round 24 is our last round of the draft. And then that's the biggest jump we see here, where they go from round 24 to round 13. And then they slide on the scale to round 10, round 7, round 4, and then ultimately go into a round number 1 pick. So, as Devin mentioned, there's an investment in the future. There are some, people that would probably look at the league and say that some of the value you're getting in those spots is not conducive for competitive nature. But I would completely disagree, because every manager in our league has a value just like that. And I think it's important for us to recognize just the dynasty feel of keeping these players with the same lore that is the redraft, because as we had, and we will reference it, of course, when we talk about the nuts and bolts of the draft, but the experience of getting together and drafting with the league cannot be duplicated in any other fashion. You need to make sure that is the camaraderie that comes with that. We get all together. Only one person from our league is not there. It's just because he's out of state, but he still participates fully. We bring food. It's a holiday. And I think a lot of leagues are doing themselves a disservice by just drafting online, or just punting on that event, because I think it's something that brings leagues together. It makes them better, and it bonds the league, and that's why we're going 13 years strong, and it's getting better every year.
Yeah, it is one of the best dates we have on the calendar every year. People look forward to it for months and months. When fantasy baseball ends, I think all of us for a few weeks are in mourning, not being able to take your phone out and refresh Yahoo and see, those green check marks of who's starting that day and maybe who you need to put a bench player in for daily league. So we're updating our lineups every single day. As far as like a regular keeper, someone say that you just drafted that wasn't an NA or anything like that. Last year, I drafted Chris Sale, I think, in the 7th round. So I get to keep him this year in the 7th round. And I think there's plenty of other leagues that do things like that as well. Really, where the value comes in is these NA players, like we kind of mentioned before, the prospects, because you can get a lot of run with them if you hit. Some of them are kind of like lottery tickets, but if you hit them, you have them for a while at unbelievable value. So a couple other things here. We are a head-to-head points league. That's important. Another frame of reference, because Roto, you're trying to hit those categories. A guy like Luis Arias might be way more valuable in a Roto league because he's going to help you in the average department, right? Certain guys that just have a ton of speed, but maybe don't do a ton else, you're going to grab some of these guys earlier to help you in the stolen base department. Closers have a lot more value because you want that saves category if that's your strategy. So we are not Roto. We are head-to-head points. We've tinkered with the points a lot over the years, but I feel like we have pretty much found a system we love. Every once in a while, we discuss small changes from year to year. But to give you guys an example, because points are different in every league, not necessarily standard here, I would say a premier hitter averages somewhere around 1.3 to 1.9 points per game. Shohei Ohtani averaged 1.87 last year in our league. Aaron Judge averaged 1.79 in our league last year. Obviously, those guys are top of the top. A premier starting pitcher, obviously not playing every day. But as far as what they average for each start, around a premier starting pitcher, around 4.5 to 6 points per start. Chris Sale, 5.76 last year. Tariq Skubal, 5.72 in our league last year. So right around the same for the Cy Young guys. So that's another, I think, helpful thing to know going into this. What we want to do here, unless Steve has anything else to add to structure, we're going to basically, there's 24 rounds, as I think we mentioned, and then NAs are taken after that. We are going to try to go through these 24 rounds. Don't worry, we're not reading every single player's name. What I think we're going to do is maybe before we start going through the rounds, we're going to tell you some of the players that were kept so you understand why they're maybe being skipped over in certain rounds that you expect them. But after that, the first 8 rounds, Steve and I are both going to highlight something that stood out in that round. After round 8, we're probably just going to bounce back and forth. I'll do one in one round. He'll do one in the next. And just a little discussion. So we'll highlight certain players and what we thought, whether we loved the pick, where it was, or disliked it for certain reason. And we'll try to be, we'll try to give you an explanation for our thoughts. But Steve, why don't we go through some of those keepers so the listeners can understand who was not available to be taken?
Well, most of these superstar players you're talking about are capped here. So we can go from, the first team that had the first overall pick. His keepers range from Cole Reagans being at the 12th pick in his draft, Jazz Chisholm, Tariq Skubal, Brandon Fatt, Xavier Edwards, and of course all of his prospect players. But some big names. Julio Rodriguez was kept in the 7th round. We also had Paul Skeens kept in the 15th round, so huge value there. Garrett Crochet round 22, James Wood in around 23, and Jackson Holiday pulling up the rear in round 24. Other big names, of course, Shohei Ohtani, the biggest name on the board. He is one of those guys that would be looked at as, well, can't wait to get him in the first round. Well, guess what? Someone kept him in the 7th round in our league, and that's someone who's had him for quite the long time here before he was thought of as the best hitter in baseball. So other names on here, Juan Soto, you're getting the full value of that because I've had Soto, or Soto has been inside this tiered system for quite some time at this point, kept 7 years in a row, whether on my team or another team, and he's a number 1 overall pick. Aaron Judge is the same thing. Some other big names like Devin mentioned before, Gunnar Henderson is a round 11 pick. Ellie De La Cruz is around 13. Evan Carter's around 24. Corbin Carroll, who was someone that was obviously kept as a prospect because he would be a top 5, top 6, top 7 pick. He's in the round 13, and the list goes on. So the key is to hit on these players that are what we call NA prospects, and you can see some names in here that will be future superstars, and you can probably pinpoint the ones we're thinking of: Roman Anthony's, the Christian Campbell's, maybe the Colson Montgomery's, Drew Thorpe. All these guys, who you hit on them, that is the investment, a lotto ticket, like Devin put it before, and he goes through the system. And I believe that it makes the league entertaining, makes it fun. There has to be a level of research, and a big point of contention has always been the trading of draft picks. We want the trade deadline to be something that is active, especially for the haves and have-nots, those looking to compete and those looking to invest in the future. And we found a nice system where these prospects are gold and they are currency that eventually turns into deals that happen, that make a lot of noise at the trade deadline. So you have a lot of movers and shakers trying to capture magic in a bottle. And I think, again, it's unique to every league. And I take some pride in that the head-to-head points model has kind of become in vogue as of late. And it's because some of the writers are progressive. The fantasy players have been a little bit more forward thinking. Some of the older players are now not the people creating content. Those that were stuck on roto categories and it couldn't be anything else. Because I remember when we first did this league, you couldn't find anyone talking about head-to-head points. We had to essentially create our own rankings throughout our own understanding because no one was doing it. Now, you get the Scott Whites. We just did the mock draft on CBS Sports. Chris Welsh does the same thing. So there's a lot of people out there doing it well. And I think the head-to-head model creates competition. You have someone you're playing against. And ultimately, we modeled after the fantasy football thing we all fell in love with. And it's the best of both worlds because it's every day, like Devin said, setting your lineup, tinkering with it, add drops, all that, and more. So some people think it's a lot of work, but I think it's a lot of fun. And I think that's the more you put into your team, the more you get out of it. And I think that's maybe the missing piece for a lot of people in a league that doesn't have the engagement that we do in For the Fame.
Yeah, and there's definitely a learning curve. Every once in a while, a new manager comes in, replacing someone who's left, and it's very rare for someone to come in their first year and do pretty well. We've seen it before, actually, just a couple of years ago. But for the most part, it's been like a 3-year learning curve, where year 3 is usually a pretty decent year for some of these new people. And just a couple other guys to highlight. Some of the darlings this year of guys that are thought of as breakout guys. like a Spencer Schwellenbach, a Junior Caminero, like they're being kept in around 23 and 24 because they're young guys that were on a team as prospects, as NA. So that's a perfect example. And to go back to what Steve said with we don't do draft pick trades. And I suggest any commissioner listening, if you do draft pick trades in your league, change it right now. Come up with get some NA spots in there, even if you don't want to go full dynasty. We didn't. And what happens is these prospects become such a currency, and it's really fun. I mean, the trade we always use as an example is between the two of us here a few years back. I was kind of gunning for a championship. Steve was kind of trying to look towards next year. I had Corbin Carroll as a prospect, as an NA, right? Not going to do anything for me that year. So I was able to turn that into a trade to Steve, who very much coveted a Corbin Carroll for the future. And I got Logan Webb from him, who helped me to a championship that year. A very reliable starter, a guy that quality start machine. It worked out for both because Steve is sitting there still with Corbin Carroll at great value because he got him as an NA. So I suggest that to everybody. No draft pick trades. Use those NAs in place of it. But let's get started. We're gonna jump into it here and go into round one now that you guys have a little bit of a background as far as who was not available and how the point structure works. I'll give you my thought on round one here as far as who stood out to me. I thought pick number one, who is a friend of ours named Mike Perrier. Mookie Betts, I thought he got it right with who was on the list of guys he could take. That also included guys like Jose Ramirez, Lindor, Tucker, Fernando Tatis. Guys like that were available. For me, Mookie Betts was the right decision because he can give you a little bit of anything, and he has these multiple positions. Yahoo, by the way, is a little more forgiving because they'll hold on to a position from the year prior, even if it's common knowledge that that guy is not playing that position this year. It takes them a while to take a position away. So you're getting great versatility with Mookie Betts. He can do a little bit of everything, and he's in the best lineup in baseball. So that was what stood out to me. I thought he got it right.
Yeah, I agree. The Mookie Betts pick wasn't surprising to me, and I think we were all joking around on the lead up in the group chat that Mookie Betts was already taken as far as like in his mind since the draft had kind of shooken out, and we had our keepers being chosen, which moved up this year. We usually do at the end of the World Series, and it was vetoed to have it made so late. And you know what? There still was injuries like a Luis Heel after the fact anyway, so you can't
Right.
fight those. You can't fight those demons at all. One of the things I was pleasantly surprised was Zach Wheeler. And if you look at some of his head-to-head numbers, my brother Jimmy, who had pick number 6 in the first round, Zach Wheeler I had on my board as the best available pitcher out of all the ones left. And in a lot of ways, he's top 3 in the head-to-head matchup. I love what he brings to the table, the strikeouts. Maybe not your best pitcher in a roto format, but Zach Wheeler has all the makings of maybe a number 1 overall pitcher in all of baseball as far as fantasy goes, head-to-head points in that model. So I love Wheeler this year.
Yeah, and I agree with you. When I tried to figure out, because I had the last pick in the first round, so I always like to try to go through and figure out, all right, who might be there when it gets to me. I liked the Wheeler pick. In my kind of forecasting, I expected 2 pitchers to go in the first round. I thought maybe Wheeler and Corbin Burns would go. I ended up being wrong. It was just Wheeler. And I thought if you're going to only take one of the pitchers that was available, because, there's no Skeens, there's no Skubal, and there's a few other guys that aren't there. Wheeler, to me, was the one who should go and deserves to go there. So I agree with you there. I thought that was another good one. If we scroll down to round 2 here, very quickly as far as what jumps out, to me, like jumping off the page is Jacob deGrom. He goes
Yeah.
in round 2 of our draft to our buddy Nick, I believe, took him, who wasn't happy about taking him either, but felt like he had to there. I thought people would wait on deGrom at least another round. And again, I know these ADPs mean very little because so many guys are gone already. So you're going to reach for guys and take them way earlier than you would in a redraft. So anyone thinking like, oh man, Jacob deGrom was taken number 60 or 70 in our league, guys, a lot, like we just said, don't forget what we told you in the intro. A lot of these top players are already gone, which is going to make all these other guys that are available be chosen earlier. But I was a little surprised at the deGrom pick that early. We don't really know if someone else in that round would have taken him if he was available. But I mean, there was still a Yoshinobu Yamamoto available at that point. Garrett Cole was still available at that point. Aaron Nola. Like there were other guys that some people might think of as more dependable. Now we know that Jacob deGrom's ceiling is higher than maybe anybody when he's right. But I was a little surprised to see him taking that early.
Yeah, it was a big roll of the dice, especially with we haven't seen a full healthy Jacob deGrom. And what we saw at the end of last year, and you guys can go back or listen to our Jared Sandler episode talking about the Texas Rangers. There's a lot to be excited about what Jacob deGrom's going to be bringing to the table when he takes that mound for the first time. But I think there is a little bit playing into the hands of there is a desperation for pitching in our league, because if you look at all the keepers, there is certainly a lot of the best keepers are pitchers. And
Right.
obviously, being that there's the under 202s and under five, and you can keep a pitcher, there's some teams that are keeping upwards of three pitchers. So you can really stack all of them. So you want to be able to have a top of the line ace. But like you said, looking at the other players that were available, there's a lot more risk for a Jacob deGrom. And I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because I'm the one that took the risk in another round with Ronald Acuna Jr. So we'll
Right.
talk about that pick down the line. There was a certain level of risk and rolling of the dice that could pay off in huge dividends if it does pay off. But you have to go with the sure thing sometimes, and you have to think maybe his fandom came into play. He loves Jacob deGrom, and I mean everyone's excited for him, but to see him go there is a certain flair of like, even in our draft with a lot of keepers being left here and a lot of pitchers being off the board, I still think there were other guys that I would have taken over Jacob deGrom.
Yeah, and don't forget, Nick also just got the news about Luis Heel. All right, the news just came out today, so he didn't know the extent of it yesterday. But I think he probably thought he was going to have to take some risks to get his pitching staff up to snuff with the news of Heel. So I think to be fair to him, there was a little bit of that, like, oh, I might be losing this guy, so you know what? Let's go for it here with a guy that for years was the best pitcher on the planet, and maybe we get that again this year. So there's a little bit of that. As far as another guy that stood out to you in that round, anyone jump out either in a good or bad way?
Well, Austin Riley, I love Austin Riley's bat, and he's one of those players I've targeted in all my drafts and I wanted to get. And
Same.
unfortunately, he wasn't there for me. So Austin Riley being there, I think Bazada took him
Yep.
at overall pick 18. So I love Austin Riley, and with third base being what it is this year, I think Austin Riley is a highly sought after player, and he's going to be one of those guys that just is consistent. And I think the Braves are a team, a lineup this year that has a lot to live up to as far as last year goes. I think last year was a lost year for them, and I fully expect them on both sides of the ball to come out swinging. And Austin Riley in a bounce back year, I really like the production we're going to see from him.
Yeah, you said it, the bounce back. Like he's not going to have the same down year he had last year, man. Like some people might be forgetting how much of a beast that guy is. And third base is not a great position this year. I mean, you lost Ellie De La Cruz and Gunnar Henderson. They both lost their third base eligibility. So that's a pretty big knock on a position. And I think there are a few other things there. So that's a tough position. So you grab Austin Riley there. It's got to feel good. I think probably a lot of the rest of us had our eyes on like, maybe he'll trickle down a little bit to us in the next round. Not to be. I'll be honest, round 3, as I look here, there's multiple people I want to talk about, but I'm trying to narrow it down to one. I'm going to go with the guy you took because I think he's a big talking point. All right, so Steve here took Ronald Acuna with the 8th pick in the 3rd round. So 28th overall, but not really because of all the keepers, as we are going to continue to say here. But he took him in the 3rd round, right after Framber Valdez was taken, right before Marcus Semien, to give you a little picture of who else was around this spot. And I think that round, you get to that time where if it comes to you and he's still on the board, you're kind of like, I think I just got to do it. This is where I think you take the shot at him. And I'll be honest, I'm a couple picks after you. Before you took him, I was already going through the process of like, all right, if he's still there, do I use one of these picks for him? And you grabbed him. Listen, Ronald Acuna is not going to run as much as he always has in the past, most likely, but he still is going to be capable of hitting 40 home runs. He's still in one of the best lineups, if not the best. Like it's Braves Dodgers most likely for that battle of best lineup. If the Braves are healthy, and at this point Acuna seems to be an every other year dude. It's like ACL tear, 40-70, ACL tear. I don't know. He's due this year, I guess, for something big. I don't think he's going to start the season right away from what I've read, maybe a few weeks. But like, if the value you could get is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Acuna, I saw the latest could be June for him, and that's a worst case scenario. But even so, stashing him there and you have him during the meaty months of the summer out there, and if you have the the depth to be able to justify leaving him on your bench or putting him on the IL. It makes sense here. Like you said, I was talking about Jacob deGrom and rolling the dice for him, and I understand where Nick was, but it was almost too good to pass up with Acuna being in the spot that he was right here, because I knew there would be definitely remorse if I didn't pull the trigger. Because you watch what he does on a year in year out basis. He's more of the player we see when he is having those electrifying seasons than the ones we see when he's down. And there, you can't really write in an injury every year, and who knows what happens, because we've seen freak injuries happen. He's had a few of them, but I would still say Ronald Acuna Jr. I'll take him any day on my team, and I think he's one of those guys that if he's going to be healthy, he's going to be playing good baseball.
Yeah, I had him the year after his first ACL tear, so the year after. And the only thing that was annoying about him was it took him a little while to seemingly get his sea legs, and he was kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit. You could tell he still was recovering. So who knows if we see a little bit of that this year as well. But as far as the other guys in round 3, as far as who jumps out to you?
Well, Wyatt Langford completely jumped out at me, being at the top of that round. I love Wyatt Langford. We sat here on this podcast when we were talking about prospects and who's going to be next, and we compared him to Mike Trout, and we've heard the aforementioned Jared Sandler compare him to Mike Trout. He's going to be a superstar player, and he came alive at the end of the year last year, so enough to make some differences here for our good friend Matt Lawless to go in there and take the risk on a Wyatt Langford that early. And again, packing in the parameters of our keeper adjacent league with the dynasty feel to it, that's still pretty high for Wyatt Langford. Looking at the players that were left there, you have players that are more established, more capable of doing exactly what you want them to do. I think the ceiling for Wyatt Langford is super high, but we haven't obviously seen him in a full season. We've seen him in a handful of bats look electrifying, and he could look like a genius for taking him there, or he could really tank a season by not having Wyatt Langford live up, because everyone knows he's going to be a good player. Everyone, I mean, essentially he has all the skill sets, but who's to say it's going to be this year? Who's to say he's going to take that huge jump this year? I would be a betting man and say that he's going to have a much better season, especially with a Texas lineup similar to the Braves that is out for blood. They definitely want to go out there and, even like the guy taken in this round too with Corey Seager. I think Corey Seager is also another bounce back candidate. You're like, damn, these guys are going to be hitting the ball. But you and I were saying it all summer watching games in Texas. When was the ball going to start to travel off these guys' bats? And we just never saw it. So,
Well, Jared Sandler, man, our guy, he keeps on tweeting out these stats of how, and he mentioned it when we had him on, how bad the Rangers were against fastballs. That's usually the you look at that lineup, and if you're a casual fan, you'd be like, oh, this team probably crushes fastballs. They were awful. There is no way in hell they can be that bad against fastballs again. So you can just improve in that statistic, and you're going to get some extra wins and some extra home runs and things like that. So I'm with you, man. I expect Texas up and down the roster. Bounce back.
Langford, Seager, and Semien were all taking in this round, all staggered between a few picks. So Texas was a team that everyone was looking at. And no shock. I mean, like we said, we love the offense regardless. Even last year, I think people are not scared away by those numbers that everyone was being thrown out as far as the fastballs or otherwise. It was just a, whatever you want to call it, a hangover year or whatever. Those three hitters are electric, and they find a way in your lineup any point of the season you want them there. It's just interesting to me that Wyatt Langford is the first one taken out of all of them, right? Is that interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of wanting that youth, and there's still all that potential, and a guy that his best days are in front of him rather than some of these other guys where their best days might be behind him. So if you look at it actually, like the NFBC, they have their ADP for Wyatt Langford is at 41, and that's for not
Pretty,
keeper kind of thing.
pretty relative to where we are. Yeah.
Yeah, he's taking him 22 here, and that's after 50 guys were kept, right? So that's, I mean, pretty good, honestly, from looking at it that way. If I scroll down, round 3 is an interesting round. I feel like we spent some time on it, kind of because there's a lot of interesting guys there. But if I scroll down to round 4, the guy that jumps out to me is Brent Rooker. So Trav, our friend Trav here, who has been in the championship mix for years in a row now, seemingly. Brent Rooker, I think the only question on him is, can he do it again? Is it a one-hit wonder, or will he do it again? But if you look at, go to whatever league you're in and get to the average points last year, he's unbelievably high. And some of the names he's surrounded by, you're like, holy crap. So Brent Rooker, I think the only question is, is that a one-time thing, or is this who that guy is? And he's playing in Sacramento, the thin air of that crazy heat. So if that is who he is last year, man, the numbers could be even better this year with an improving young club around him. So I like the Brent Rooker pick. I think if he was there in that 4th round, you absolutely have to take him.
Yeah, and I think hopefully Rooker will have some more playing time in other positions. He will get more than just the left field eligibility. That to me is a little bit hamstrung as far as how you put your lineup together. I hate when an outfielder only has the one specific corner, but it is what it is. You can't deny his bat. You'll find a way to put him in the lineup. The other interesting part of this to me was CJ Abrams, seeing him go here. And we know the shortcomings last year and the behavioral stuff we saw with being sat down and sent down to the minors last year. And we had Chase Slusky on here that did kind of give insight into the national system. You go back in our archives and hear him talk about it. There's no denying, similar to Wyatt Langford, there's potential for CJ Abrams, but similar here, looking at, and again, if you look at the players around him, if I asked you, Devin, who would you rather have on your fantasy team, Willie Adames or CJ Abrams? I feel like you take Abrams, just, I mean, especially the ballpark considered, right? With San Francisco, that free agent spot. Maybe Adames in Milwaukee, you would have a different story, but I really feel like people were scared away from Adames being in San Francisco a little bit.
Yeah, I might be the wrong guy to ask. I'm just not an Abrams fan. I can't put it into words too much, but I don't know. I'm he hasn't made me a believer yet, and it has nothing to do with behavior stuff. To be honest, I just don't think he's a complete player, and he's the kind of guy for whatever reason. You got to remember they have a lot of prospects in that team, and a lot of guys like Brady House is still a guy that no one is even really talking about that'll be up eventually. There's a small part of me that could see Abrams losing his spot in a couple years. I know some people are probably listening, what are you talking about? This guy's a stud. I'm not a true believer yet. So if you're asking me, I might. I don't love Adames in San Francisco either. But if it's between those guys, I might go with Adames. But Abrams is fascinating to watch this year to see if he does take the next step or if he possibly regresses.
And then the interesting part with the last pick of that round was Anthony Santander and Tony Taters over there in Toronto. I mean, we know what he's been doing in Baltimore. Does the ballpark to you? I know we saw Perrier take him. Is there an adjustment on the player because he's not in Baltimore in that lineup? Like if he goes to Toronto, is he a worse off player? Or are you looking at him as just a year older, same type of player?
Yeah, no, I think he'll mash in Toronto. I mean, I didn't love the signing on Toronto's part just because I feel like they're all over the place with the different type of players they're signing. But no, I think he'll be fine offensively there. I don't see the Toronto ballpark being much of a factor. If we scroll down to round 5 here, as I kind of look through, I mean, I'm not trying to call each other out here, but Bryce Miller, without even looking at who took him, God, man, I love this dude. So I made what I would call a dumb trade last year, and you want to say something about him, or you
No,
want
it's just
to?
I drafted
It's
him.
your pick. Okay, yeah, yeah. Steve's pick. Steve's pick here. Bryce Miller. I traded him last year. He was on my staff, and I felt like I had more pitching than I needed, which is rare for me because I want as much pitching as possible in this specific league. Pitching is at a premium. But I traded him to Bizada for Will Smith because I lost Wilson Contreras at catcher, and I thought, oh, let's get a stud catcher here because it's so rare to have one, and give up something that I have a lot of. And then Bryce Miller just continued to be awesome, and Will Smith was good, but like catcher, it's still not as many points as some of the premier guys. But yeah, I love the Bryce Miller pick, man. He just keeps on adding pitches. I, that staff obviously in Seattle is loaded with talent. Like, I could see Bryce Miller ascending to the top of that rotation one day. I really could. So I loved that pick.
Yeah, and I had wound up collecting all the Seattle Mariners pitchers. I obviously have the ace of the staff, Logan Gilbert, who I capped. I got a lot of value in the 4th round, which is just insane in a head-to-head points league because he was looked at as maybe a top 3 pitcher in this format, in my opinion. And then Bryce Miller, as you mentioned, I also have Brian Wu later. So I love everything about Seattle staff. I mean, there's nothing to not like about it. I think everyone and that knows about baseball watches the Mariners know that the only thing they're deficient in is offense. Pitching, they have one of the best rotations in baseball, so it's obvious to target them. Looking at some of the other picks, I do look at Lawrence Butler, similar to what we talked about with Brent Rooker. If you look at Lawrence Butler's numbers from last year, it's shocking just how productive he really was. And if you look at that Oakland, or I should say the Athletic lineup this year, there's a lot of guys that are looking to build on a year. Because I think it's easy for us to sit here and say, this will be a sophomore slump, a coming back to earth type of situation. But you can ask yourself, if you want to be an optimistic person, what happens if they build on the season they had? What happens if Butler's
True.
a little bit better? What happens if Rooker has just expanded his swing? And I think the sky's the limit for Butler and Rooker. And there's something magic going on in I mean, the one magic thing happening in player development offensively with the Athletics at this point. They're finding a way to turn these hitters that were mediocre into really productive hitters. And I would imagine that someone in that lineup right now that we have no idea who it is will be this year's Brent Rooker or Lawrence Butler. Mark my
I
words.
mean, yeah, those two you named, Butler and Rooker, they might be the new Bash brothers there for the Athletics. I mean, JJ Bleday at times looked great last year. I mean, he's a former top prospect that, the Marlins ended up sending away. And I mean, the A's got him, and he's kind of that post hype guy, like post type guy. He might be the next guy because he showed signs of it last year. Tons of doubles for JJ Bleday. So he might be the guy to keep your eyes on to be the next one. And just to give another reference here, so Bryce Miller, NFBC, he's 80th in the ADP. You took him at pick number 48. That's again with 50 keepers beforehand. So again, seems like good value. A lot of these guys, as I'm looking back and forth to where they were taken in our draft and where their ADP is in NFBC, it's about 30 spots above the redraft spot. So that kind of makes some sense. All right, so round 6, we'll try to cruise through here to try to keep going. I mean, there's a few people to pick from here, but I'm going to go with Sandy Alcantara, taken in the 8th spot in round 6 by Bazada. And he's another fascinating player to me. I mean, this guy a couple years ago was the only guy in baseball that you almost expected to go 9 every time. He was unbelievable, and he was huge in the fantasy world. So to see if he can recapture that, I said a couple days ago, I think to you, I think Sandy Alcantara is going to be the biggest trade guy at the deadline that everyone's gunning for, and the Marlins probably hope so they can get a king's ransom from whoever is the top bidder for Sandy Alcantara. I'd be shocked if they keep him around for the future, but I do think they hold on to him until the deadline and hope that he's great. Let him prove that he's great again and send him on his way so they can get some younger guys in here. But yeah, Sandy Alcantara, I would say risk. I don't think it's that much risk. It's the 6th round after 50 keepers. Like, it's not a super high pick. So I liked the choice there. Hunter Green went right after him. So you could debate, do you take the young stud with more in front of him that can strike out the world? Or do you believe in the old guy coming back from a big injury? And I guess Bazada believes that Sandy is going to get back to his old form.
And the player, I mean, I love that pick you're talking about. And I looked at him as it's hard not to remember the 2022 season. It feels like it was yesterday, but it was 3 years ago. So we have to keep that in perspective as far as what Sandy's going to be doing this year. But I would bet on him. I mean, if he can stay on the mound, it's one of those things. If and when we see him on there, he's going to pitch his heart out, and he has some motivation as well. Like I think there is, and not to dunk on Marlins fans, but there is a motivation. Like, this may be his last chance to get out of Miami and go somewhere and maybe potentially win a ring. So the one pick I did enjoy here was Jordan Westberg, and he praised on the Orioles. I love Westberg. I know you picked him here. I was surprised to see him fall where he did. I happened to be kind of cruising with pitching, and I was keep my eye on Westberg this whole time. I love Westberg. He's one of the bright spots in that lineup, and I think a lot of people are talking about the main prospects, the whatever the prospect factory they are, printing out players that look like Jackson Holiday, Heston Kjerstad. But in the same breath, Jordan Westberg went out there and did his thing. He didn't come in with all the praise and the hype that every one of these other prospects did, but all he does is hit the ball. And I fully expect him to go in Camden Yards. And really, there was points in the season last year. He was the heart and soul of that team offensively. And I still think he's one of those guys who we haven't even seen the best of yet. So I'm excited to see what he does this year in the AL East.
Yeah, we're used to these young Oriole prospects being blocked by veterans. But Westberg almost blocked his fellow prospect, Kobe Mayo. Like, I don't know if Mayo has a spot on that team anymore. I think some of us expected Mountcastle to be traded to open that up for Mayo. That didn't happen. And Mayo was really bad when he got called up last year, and he's been really bad in spring training. So I'm not sure what the future is for another post-hype guy, Kobe Mayo. He's still got all the potential in the world. But yeah, Westberg, second base, third base eligibility. I love that in that spot for sure. If I go down to round 7, I'm going to highlight a guy that in some ways might be similar to Westberg as far as versatility. Our guy Lawless here took Matt McLain, another guy. And I guess these guys that are coming back from injury, they do stand out because they are interesting to watch, as we've said a few times here. I think Matt McLain, playing now under Terry Francona, second base shortstop eligibility on Yahoo. There's been rumblings that he'll play some outfield, so maybe he gains a spot there, center field or something like that. I think on Yahoo, you only have to play 5 games or start 5 games at a position to get that eligibility, something along those lines. I know it's pretty lenient for Yahoo. So love to see what Matt McLain is doing there. I think this is a good spot for him. I mean, he's sandwiched between Brian Reynolds, and I'd say Julio Rodriguez was a keeper, but that's there. And then like Yainer Diaz was taken at catcher after that to give you a better idea. So I love Matt McLain in the spot. You got to remember, man, when he came up, again, another guy it's easy to forget, but he's a stud offensively. He can carry a team for a little while.
And it feels like he just needed the focus, or this whole lineup needed the focus of a guy like Terry Francona. And I think he's going to squeeze every last piece of offense out of these players. And I think McLean is a Francona guy. He has this DNA that he just feels like he's going to go on the field and play hard every day. The pick that really caught my eye was Cody Bellinger in this round, only because of I wouldn't say drama that kind of was dug up from the Scott White CBS draft, but when Bellinger was taken in the third round in a redraft league, we saw
So early.
And watching him go in round 7 here, which I feel like, again, with the everything considered, probably more consistent to where Cody Bellinger's been going in a lot of head-to-head leagues. I love what Bellinger brings to the table in this type of round, though. And I think there's a lot of holes in his game. He's a year older, but you put him in Yankee Stadium, I think his swing is made for it. And Bellinger's going to be a favorite. I really believe that. There'll be days where he is the butt of every New York back page. I think there's going to be a certain sect of the fans that will fall in love with him when the Yankees are playing well in the summer. He's going to be selling a lot of jerseys. I really believe that. I think a lot of 35 jerseys will be in the Bronx this year. And I think Bellinger is going to be one of those cult hero type of guys. He's a former MVP, so it's not like we're sitting here acting like he's this like journeyman player, but there's a certain nature of Cody Bellinger this year that feels like he has to prove it, because it's not like his tenure in the Cubs went so poorly, but it's so far removed from the player he was with the Dodgers on that World Series run. It feels like he's a man without a home. And I think he has an opportunity, especially with this Astro flair. There's that tie where he hates the Astros. He's on the Yankees now and he talks shit about the Astros. There's something about Bellinger that makes him feel a little bit like energized coming into the season. I'm not sure about anyone else, but I just like Bellinger when he brings to the table, especially with the value where I think Nick took him in this round.
Yeah, and if you look at his points per game last year, they're pretty damn high. It's just that he missed a lot of time. And that's kind of been what Bellinger has become a little bit. So, but if he can put a full season together for the Yankees, and they need it, man, because they're already getting dinged up here. They have a lot of former MVPs that are trying to prove they still got it. You got to love him in that stadium. His dad played for the Yankees. It seems like he's always wanted to be there, and he's finally found his way. Back to ADP stuff here. Cody Bellinger, NFBC, ADP 102. In our draft, he was taken 65th, and that is after 50 keepers. So again, seems to make some sense if you do the math. Going down to round 8, this is going to be the last round that we highlight 2 guys, 1 each, and then we're going to try to go a little more turbo speed through the remaining rounds. If I look here at round 8, I have to talk about Mike Trout. So Mike Trout is a guy that I think 95% of baseball fans are rooting for this year. Since the day we started this podcast, I feel like we've found ways to talk about Mike Trout because of our love for him and the desire to see him be himself again for a full season, not just for a month or 2 before he gets hurt. So he's taken here by Trav. Great value. I think there's probably multiple brains thinking about him in this round. And Trav didn't wait too long. The second pick in the 8th round, 72nd overall, after 50 keepers. I mean, it's hard to even imagine that a couple years ago that he's being taken that far down in the draft. So, man, the value you are getting there, if Mike Trout can do what we know he's capable of, and obviously he's not going to run, but just the power department and the RBI department, I mean, that could be a hell of a pick. That could be a league-winning pick.
I still feel like he's a trade away from just being re-energized. And it doesn't have to be to Philly, it just needs to be to a contender. And the Angels did some stuff this offseason. They pieced some stuff together. They spent some money, but I still think they're so far away that I think baseball fans are owed a Mike Trout postseason run, some magic that we see from Mike Trout. It's just like it doesn't feel right that he's going to be kind of going out with a whimper this way. And I'm hoping, like you said, he can have a renaissance of a season and make people remember why he is Mike fucking Trout. Like, this guy is truly one of those. I mean, he's a player that had defined a generation. I think we are soon forgetting that while these young players come up, and Mike Trout needs they need to put some respect on Mike Trout's name. The other player that I really enjoy in this round is Brenton Doyle, and I just love watching this guy play. So personally, on my end of things,
Same.
not sure how that transcends to fantasy. I think he's a good fantasy player for sure, but Doyle's one of my favorite players to watch in all of baseball. Stuck in the abyss that is Colorado, but I think Doyle is a bright spot. Very exciting, highlight real type of player, and I think he's going to bring a lot to the table. He has center field eligibility. Yahoo has him ranked 70 to start the year, and that is pretty good. So there's a lot of high expectations, but there's something about Brenton Doyle and what he brings to the table, and I like the value that Jimmy was getting him for him in this round.
Yeah, I had him last year and loved him. He was great for me. Um, and I was a guy who had Mike Trout last year in the center field spot. Then he got hurt, and Doyle was able to come in for me and kind of make it not hurt so much. Course Field too, never hurts to have a guy there. You just hope
True.
that Doyle doesn't fall into the Nolan Jones category. I mean, going into last year, Nolan Jones was like highly thought of because he went off in 2023, and he barely heard his name last year. Doyle kind of went off last year. You hope he doesn't kind of have the same thing happen to him this year. So round 9 and on, we're going to try to go a little faster here. I'll pick a guy in one round, give a little blurb, and then Steve the next round, on and on and on until we get to the end here, or as close as we can at least. So round 9 here, I'm going to highlight Adolis Garcia. He's taken here 83rd after 50 keepers. So you do that math, it's like 130 something really. He came out and said he wants to hit 50 home runs this year, steal a bunch of bases. I think, remember, he got hurt in the World Series when they won it. I don't know if he was healthy last year. I don't expect this guy to hit for a high average ever again, to be honest. I don't think he's that guy, but could he pop 50? Look at the dude's arms and then tell me what you think. This could potentially be great value, similar to Trout. Not that Garcia was badly hurt, but I think maybe he was banged up. Again, Texas bounce back, Bruce Bochy every other year. There's a lot of things that make the signs point up for Adolis Garcia. So that is our guy, Bizarro, who we've mentioned several times here today. And we're not really looking at the names. I'm looking at the players' names first and then telling you who drafted him. But shout out to him because I like that pick there as well.
For round 10, the name that popped off was Roki Sasaki, and it had me thinking this. I was commuting to work today, and I was thinking about Roki and why he fell the way he did, because he came in with immense hype, and I understand that the Dodgers are collecting the Infinity Stones, and I kept thinking to myself, is it the fact that he wound up in a loaded Dodger rotation? I don't think it's that. Is it the fact that Kyle Teal took him deep in a batting practice clip? I don't know if it's that either. Is it the one rumbling that we continue to hear that he was saying, or his agent said, that Tommy John surgery is surely in his future? I'm not sure, but he has fallen not just in this league, but in every league. His ADP has plummeted a little bit, and I was curious to see, because we are a league that really values, like as we mentioned before, the prospects and the young players, to be able to get Roki in some way and have him from the jump. We saw Yamamoto go really high last year. Maybe Yamamoto came in a little bit more, I guess, with more expectations, because Yamamoto obviously had his full career over in Japan, and then we came in with all the money is being paid. Roki was posted. We covered it here in full. But I would say they came in, for on my end, the expectations are the same. I think Roki's supposed to come in here and do some things here. There might be a level of kid gloves for Roki. I'm just curious
That's what
your
I think
thoughts
it
of
is.
this.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's the thought of kid gloves and then being careful of them, and they can afford to be super careful with him this year. He's still so young, but he also is cheap. So like, there's a part of it where like, let's just use him. We're not paying this dude much. Like if he blows out his shoulder, we have a
Right.
million other guys. He's super young. We're not paying him a ton of money. It doesn't hurt as much. So yeah, I think it's the kid gloves that scared some people off. I was the one who drafted him. Happy to have him. I felt like I needed a little youth in my team. So whatever I get from him this year, great. But he's a piece. We talked about the NA spots. He's a piece that, even though I'm not getting him at the end of the draft, it'd be nice to have him maybe for a few years here as a younger guy. Or if I'm looking for another championship, and there's someone who wants not just an NA, but a young guy that they already know is proven, what better trade chip than Roki Sasaki? Give me two guys that are going to help me mid-season to get me to another championship. I'll give you Roki Sasaki. We'll call it a day, and I think everyone will come away happy. So there was a little thought in my head of that. Like, this guy could help me in a lot of different ways, similar to what the Dodgers do in real life. Round 11 here, Walker Buehler stands out. Nick, again, we talked about him before, losing Luis Heel, taking Jacob deGrom pretty damn early. I love the bounce back potential of Walker Buehler in Boston. Nick has been a fan of Walker Buehler. Once upon a time, I traded Walker Buehler to him straight up for Ronald Acuna. I was not well thought of at the time for Nick. Position player for pitcher. Both studs, though. But yeah, Walker Buehler, let's see what he does in Boston. He sure started to look a little more like himself in that world, or actually in the NLCS and the World Series. So maybe he's back and he just needed some time.
Round 12 pops in here. Isak Paredes with the third base eligibility and the first base eligibility. Him in Houston replacing Bregman. That lineup, I understand it's not the same as it used to be. There's been a mass exodus of Houston in a lot of ways, but I think Paredes is gonna rake in Houston, and I love everything he brings to the table. And he's gonna get every opportunity to succeed. Uh, and he's going to get a million opportunities to be that guy because they're looking for the replacements for the Tuckers, for the Bregmans, for you name it, the Springers, the Correas. I mean, Altuve is the only guy standing there, and I think Paredes is going to make them very, very happy. And in a return in a Tucker deal, when Tucker was not going to be re-signed, they weren't going to be able to retain him. I think Paredes is going to be one of those players. Like I think we won out on that deal a little bit here. I mean, Tucker's going to do his thing in Chicago this year, but if Houston, if we're the foregone conclusion, you're not going to sign and keep Kyle Tucker. If you can get a major league ready player like Paredes and then some of the prospects that they got back, I feel like Houston did really well in that Tucker deal.
Yeah, the Crawford boxes are calling Paredes' name. We've all seen that spray chart map that shows he's potentially going to hit a bunch over there.
Yep.
Round 13, super interesting in our league. A lot of people kept in this round this year because I believe it's one of the starts of the tiers. So when guys get moved, some guys end up in round 13. Tariq Skubal was kept here. Taj Bradley, I believe, was kept in the 13th round. Anthony Volpe, Bryce Harper, crazy value in the 13th round. Corbin Carroll kept in the 13th round. I think Grayson Rodriguez as well. Ellie De La Cruz. So there's not many for me to pick from guys who were actually drafted. So I'll give a shout out to Ezekiel Tovar, taken by your brother Jimmy here. A guy in Colorado, almost in anonymity, but look at the numbers, look at the doubles. This guy is showing that he could be an elite hitter, and he plays in Coors Field. So again, could be tremendous value. He wasn't kept there, was he? He was drafted there, yes?
Who is that? I'm sorry.
Ezekiel Tovar?
No, Tovar was not kept. He was drafted there.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right, that's my round 13 guy.
Well, for round 14 for me, and there's a couple picks in here that were interesting, but Christopher Sanchez, I'm looking at as a guy that a lot of people are sleeping on for what he brings to the table. We've seen him in limited sample size be out there and doing it, being dominant in some spurts. And I think I guess the criticism of why he falls down to a round like this is he hasn't done it for full stretches, but the electricity, especially with rolling the dice here, I mean, potential to be a sleeper for like, I guess the less the less educated leagues, but Christopher Sanchez, I fully expect him to go out there and be a big part of what the Phillies are doing out there. And to get him this late, I like what Travis did here.
Yeah, and just to give a quick thing here, I like that pick as well. How can you not? Wilson Contreras, I took him in this round. If you're on Yahoo, it's important to look at things like this. He's still listed as a catcher. He's going to play first base this year, which could be huge for him. A lot of catchers, you put catchers in that position, they're going to play 2 out of every 3 days, maybe 3 out of every 4. Wilson Contreras playing first, potential to play almost every single day and fill that catcher position for you. So if you're in a Yahoo league, keep your eyes on a Wilson Contreras. We know this guy can be a powerhouse. And at first base, I think he's going to be healthier. I think he's going to play more. Round 15 here, if I scroll down and try to highlight one guy, tough one, but I got to go Royce Lewis. And we all know why. Royce Lewis, this could potentially be such a freaking steal in the 15th round of a keeper league that keeps 50 guys first. I mean, this is Jimmy again, so he gets a couple shout outs for last few rounds here. Third base, we all know the story with Royce Lewis, and it's the same as a lot of other twins, Byron Buxton and Carlos Correa. Unbelievable player when he's healthy, but how often is he healthy? Not very often. The other concern is last year, towards the end of the year, he was in the lineup and fell off a freaking cliff. Like he forgot to play for a little while. We know for the most part when he's in the lineup, he looks like one of the best players in the league, usually hitting tons of home runs. So again, fantasy is all about this potential and value, and we're using those words a lot, but the value and the potential of a Royce Lewis here at pick number 146, I mean, it's through the roof.
looking at the next round here, I got Clay Holmes in my sights, and
Oh, yeah.
obviously transitioning from a reliever to a starter here. Signed a 3-year, $38 million contract with the Mets in the winter. Uh, Look at some of the advanced stats of Clay Holmes out there, just making hitters look silly. I know his time in the Bronx as the closer will be left with everyone remembering some of the moments he did not come up big. But if you look at just the broad scope of things, you put him over the course of 9 innings and he gives up that home run instead of just being a bridge at the end of the game. Clay Holmes was really, really good. And
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
looking at him if they can stretch him out, I like what he's going to be able to bring to the table. And again, the Mets, they have a magic way. I mean, what they did with Montes and what they're doing with what they did with Manaya and Luis Severino, like there's some magic dust there where if you sprinkle a little bit more on Clay Holmes, he's already coming at you with something that he has been dominant in the role he's been in. And people don't like to hear that, but that's what he's been. And then stretch him out and get him in the rotation. He has potential to be a middle of the rotation, upper middle of the rotation type of starter even this year.
Yeah, I mean, don't do what they did to Montas because they pretty much just hurt him. But I know what you're saying though. The pitching lab is starting to gain a little bit of a positive reputation there in Queens. So and there's also been this trend of relievers turned into starters that have worked really well. Garrett Crochet, Ronaldo Lopez come to mind, but they're not the only ones. So it's a trend. Maybe it continues here with Clay Holmes. Round 17 for me. I let's give it to. No, I've called out this team too much. I can't do that again, can I? All right, we'll go with Gavin Williams here. So I thought Gavin Williams, he's very much in that post type category. I had him as an NA a couple years ago. Ended up moving him for some other piece. I expected him. The comp he would get a lot is Garrett Cole, like a younger Garrett Cole that would kind of develop into that type of pitcher. He just not has not been able to put it together at the major league level, and you got to wonder if this is the year. Cleveland usually finds a way to get the most out of their young players, so it's kind of a surprise that he has not fallen into that category. But I can't say I dislike the pick because it's so late. So round 17, you're getting a guy that at one point was comped with Garrett Cole. Like, let's roll the dice again. I mean, Tristan McKenzie is another guy in Cleveland that just has not reached his potential that we thought he all had. So I guess I can't say that Cleveland's reputation is getting the best out of everybody. Maybe more so the position players and the relief pitchers, because the starters there, not as much. So we'll see what they get out of Gavin Williams.
So for rounds 18 through 24, I know there's a lot of keepers at the end of the draft. Do you want to just kind of scroll through some of them and give some highlights on your end of who you thought they'd be? Because I'm looking at round 18. There are definitely guys that catch my eye around 19 as well. Just curious on your end, if you kind of combine all those rounds together, who is the
Yeah.
pick that, kind of jump out at you?
Well, if you have one, you can go ahead while I kind of scroll. Otherwise, I'll try to get one here real quick. But um, let's see.
Well,
So I'm
I
gonna
can go
try.
with I can go with Bayo over there in round 19. I like the value
Okay.
there. With Boston, he again one of those pitchers that hasn't fully put it together. A young guy that can be frustrating to own at times. I've been a Bayo owner, but there's short spurts that make you believe that he's going to put it all together. So I like Bayo in around 19 from Bizada again. We just were talking about him as well. I'm curious your thoughts on my taking Mason Wynn. He's my starting shortstop in round 19. Mason Wynn, obviously not a top tier shortstop, but there's some promise there. I know that no one likes to talk about the Cardinals and their offense, but Mason Wynn to me, I mean, feels like he has some promise.
I think he has some promise. If you're asking me, I like him better as a real life player than I do as a fantasy player. I think he's going to continue to get better on offense. If you look at some of the advanced stuff, a lot of it's not very impressive as far as like barrel rate and things like that. But I love the personality of the player, which makes I believe that is going to translate to better numbers year in and year out. But I see him as more of I think he's going to end up as the leader of the Cardinals in the clubhouse and on the field. He's an unbelievable fielder, unbelievable arm. Offense, I think he's going to be good enough with those other attributes, almost like a Derek Jeter. And I know that's blasphemy to some people, where like, listen, the offense was very good. He had 3,000 hits, but like his leadership was really what separated from other people. And if he does enough on offense and has those big moments, I think that's what's important from him. Whether that translates to fantasy or not, I'm not 100% sure. But again, it's late. I worry a little bit about him being your starter and maybe not having another option. But there's guys out on the waiver wire that might end up being other options for you or trade options. The shortstop position, I would say it's pretty deep. I think it's actually very deep this year. One guy that stands out to me, and again, I don't want to say it as a negative thing, but I was a little surprised by it and didn't really know much about this player, to be completely honest. Sean Burke, starting pitcher for the White Sox. Trav took him here in round 20. Now, listen, these are the rounds to play a little bit and take some guys, go think outside the box a little bit. When I dove into him here, apparently, I guess what's gotten some people's attention is down the stretch he had, I guess, 4 starts where he was unreal. 1.42 ERA, 1 WHIP, 22 strikeouts to 7 walks over 19 innings. So there's some improvement here, maybe a sleeper here, trying to get someone that nobody else is really in tune to. The thing I worry about is he had a 94.1% strand rate in big leagues last year, a brief action. Someone might be listening like, whoa, that's great. Why don't you like that? Well, because it's not sustainable in the least bit. So you wonder if there was a little bit of luck there. No one's stranding 94% of guys. And honestly, even guys that have more work under their belt, when you see a left on base percentage of like above 80, that's not sustainable either. It's not going to happen. So you expect some regression there. But again, it's round 20. So you play around a little bit there. If it doesn't work out, you put him on the waiver wire and get a more dependable guy. But you try some stuff here. So I still don't mind the pick. It's just jumped out at me like, oh, I didn't know this was a guy that would even be taken in the draft.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these picks here, like you said, are dart throws, and you just want to find some magic in the bottle here. You want to find a guy that hits. And looking at the depth of we always talk about this for any fantasy draft, any sport it is, winning championships is done in the depth of the draft, probably the middle rounds, and then obviously the waiver wire and finding guys out there, the
Oh,
free
yeah.
agent wire, finding the gems all over that. And I think the biggest thing for our league and a lot of leagues out there is you're playing with the guys that all have similar strategies. And a lot of the in vogue type of conversation with draft prep was to do things differently in spite of your league. And I don't think anyone went too far away from their normal strategy because I think we've been playing together for almost 15 years in fantasy baseball. We all know the type of players we all like to draft. So I don't think anyone's team looks egregiously different. We were running them down after and looking at the final rosters and like, oh, that one looks kind of different. That really doesn't feel like a Devin type of player or a Jimmy type of player. But there is something to be said about some of these pundits out there that are asking you to, zig if your league is zagging or go up when your league is going down and find ways just to be different in spite of being different. And I found myself during the draft prep of being like, you know what, I'm going to try that. And then when I got to the draft, I got cold feet, could not do it. I
Yeah,
couldn't
I know what you're
just
saying.
go against my grain because this is not just a short-term investment. This feels like if I'm to punt or mess up a draft just to be different for the sake of being different, you have potential to have a miserable summer. Like I don't think people really consider that this whole I mean, maybe people that play 8 leagues, it doesn't matter if you do it to one league. This to me, and we wait for this all year. So I need my team
Mhm.
to be competitive, need to be in the image of what I want it to be. And I don't know, there's something to be like I don't want to be different just for the sake of being different. So I do appreciate the strategy because inevitably being different is good because you're going to do things differently than everybody else. But there's a reason why everyone puts value on what they do in fantasy baseball. Because if you don't, we've seen it happen before. And you mentioned some of our league mates that came in and they did something from the jump because they didn't know better, drafting all relievers or not taking starting pitching, and it winds up just blowing up in their face. So sometimes difference not good.
Yeah, and even like so myself and Trav, I feel like the last several years have had a lot of success with like always being either in the championship or sniffing around it. Um, as far as championship appearances, I feel like the two of us have kind of led the way for a few years now. Uh, and he and I looked at each other at one point, and this is the second year in a row where you saw all the starting pitchers that were kept and then a lot being taken early. And he looked at me and said, oh, they're on to us. And I think that's what kind of every good league is a little bit of a copycat league where if something is being successful for a certain person or a couple people for many years in a row, like you're kind of going to start trying to get in on that. Where this league, it definitely has switched from the time I started in it, where way more people are valuing starting pitching earlier in the draft and in keepers. Where when I first started, I felt like I went the opposite way, and a lot of people were going super offensive heavy. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to stack as many quality starts as I can and just have a good enough offense, target some home runs, things like that. And now it's a little harder to do that when so many other people are doing it as well. But yeah, I know what you're saying. It's easy to be a pundit on a microphone and say like, go take some risks, think outside the box. But yeah, when you're staring at those papers and your computer and the pick, it's hard to pull the trigger because you want results. I got to ask before we kind of wrap it up, the NA part. So after the 24 rounds, there were a few teams that needed to fill their NA spots. So it's like a mini NA draft that goes super quick. Were there any NA choices that weren't already locked in before the draft that were just added last night that stood out to you as like, oh, that's going to be a good one for years to come?
Well, looking at you, Travis Bazana was taken, and we all know like what he's going to do. I mean, we see the highlight reels, the romantic accent, everything about him feels like he's gonna be a star in baseball. So that was exciting to see. So that was like a no-brainer for you to take, and probably strategic on your end that you didn't keep all 6 of your NAs. I'm not sure if you thought about it that way, but
Well,
I
I
imagine you
did.
did.
I had 6 NA spots, but one of them was Dylan Cruz, who I took in the 22nd round last year.
All
So
right.
he goes up to my roster, which opens up the other NA spot. So I was happy to add Bizana for sure. Um,
And also looking at Matt Shaw that Bazada took in his spot too. I think we'd imagine Matt Shaw is going to be an absolute stud.
Yeah, I think he was just forgotten about, to be honest. I think there's a lot of leagues where he's taken in the draft. I know he's a little banged up. Maybe that made people kind of sleep on him a little bit, but I thought that was a great one. Cam Smith was the one for me. He's opening eyes in Houston during spring training. And I don't see him on a roster, so I can't remember. At first, I thought it was Russick that took him, but it looks like he has 6 other guys. So
Travis took him
Travis
in
took him.
early. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good for him. That could be a guy that you are happy to have for a very long time down the road. So that was an eye-opening one to me.
And as far as for everyone that's doing head-to-head points, you have to take in consideration the default point setting. If you go to Yahoo and the default point setting, it's nowhere near where ours is. I think you lose points for losses. The wins are somewhere like
Yeah, we got
7
rid
or
of some
8
of that
points
stuff.
per win. It's like so tilted in weird direction. So for our league, it had to be tinkered with. It took years for us to get it right and find a way to have the balance of making sure pitchers and hitters are they're not equal, but at the same time they're valuable in their own way. And like I said, it just took years. And what we do during the off season, it's we meet together. This is a living document. We have winter meetings. This is no joke. We go in there, and the league has consistency. There's no turnover here. There's been some managers that have gone to the wayside, but for the most part, the core of this league has been in this league. And the beautiful part is our podcast, the Table Setters podcast, has grown from For the Fame. If you go back in the archives, there was you type in For the Fame Commish wrap up show. That's where this came from. I was on here just giving wrap up synopsis of weeks, and Devin and I would get on here and talk about baseball. And then it turned into Table Setters. And here we are having, guests on week after week talking about baseball. But this league drives our passion for baseball. And I love baseball in totality. I love watching the Yankees. I like watching the full league. But fantasy baseball, I feel like this league sparked something in me that made me even more of a diehard baseball fan. I know I could say the same for you because I remember those years back when I was like, hey, we're doing this head to head league. And you were resistant because you had a league and it hasn't. And then some of the leagues you were in didn't work out because people were not
Right.
invested. You have to find the right amount of people to do it. And I think we really did that. And I hope people out there that play fantasy baseball, you find that because it's easy to pop on there and hop on a Discord and ask people to join your league. It's different when you have a camaraderie of getting together. And like I said, treating it like a holiday, people bringing food, spending 6 to 8 hours together, drafting live. There's nothing like that.
Yeah, and I agree. It did. I was always a baseball fan. Baseball's always been my number one sport, but this league legitimately took me from like pretty big baseball fan to like baseball nut, which is why I'm here today on this podcast weekly and having the desire to talk about it constantly, off season, real season, anytime in between. Um, but yeah, like Steve said, if anyone's listening that hasn't found that league yet, I get it, man. The reason I turned Steve down a few times for getting in this league years and years ago is because, like he said, I would run a few leagues with people and friends of mine. And it was always like, I don't know, August would hit, maybe even July, and half the teams were like barely paying attention. I get it. You're updating your leagues daily. There's some people that are more made for fantasy football when you just basically have to pop on there on Sunday or maybe a Thursday to make sure your lineup's set. And that's it. Set it and forget it. I love the daily grind, man. I absolutely love it. And just looking ahead and trying to figure out how you're going to kind of get the advantage at the end of the week if it's a close one. It's fun. It's super strategic. Having 10 people that are into it, or 12, if anyone's lucky enough out there to have 12 passionate people that are involved, whether their team sucks or their team is the best team in the league. That's the key, man. And if you don't have it, keep looking for it.
So wishing you guys the best of luck in your drafts if it's happening this weekend. If you already had your draft, hop on social media, share your team with us. I'm curious to see how you guys did.
Yeah.
What was your strategy? Did you take anything from what we did here? Maybe your Roto League, and just tell us how it was different from our head-to-head league. Just a quick note here. You can also support us by following us on Instagram and on Twitter at TableSetters Pod. And please go to Dugout Mugs and buy something. Use code TS10 at checkout to save 10% on your order. A lot of great stuff. Devin was able to get me my Dugout mug. I was able to drink out of it. It's fantastic. I got my bottle opener. I'm ready for baseball season.
Yeah, man, and we'll be back soon here. We're gonna start firing a few episodes at not at a time, but a few episodes per week, probably with division previews coming up. Maybe a little shorter than usual, 35 minutes or so per division. So they'll be coming out. For the next few weeks. We might be on here twice a week, or at least giving you 2 episodes a week with those division previews. Maybe we'll mix in some guest things if we can get those coordinated as well. So season's coming close, and we're gonna fire it up here.
Shout out to Chris Marks, who I got my gift package with my Fighting Camels Under Armour shirt. I'll be rocking that all season long. Roll humps. I'm excited, man.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine, man. Come on.
It's coming. It's coming.
I'm getting into the roll humps mood. I know. I'll be looking forward to it.
It's coming. And, also Blue Hens are out there just absolutely hammering the ball too. So, I mean, those
Aaron Graber. Go look up some Aaron Graber highlights. This guy smokes the ball in Newark, Delaware. It's unbelievable.
Dalen Thompson too out there making the Campbell Fighting Camels very, very proud. But we'll be back next week talking all things baseball. As Devin mentioned, division previews coming up. We are a mere 15 days away from the Tokyo series, so getting excited there. Baseball is just around the corner, and we will talk to you after a while.
That has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly.